Welcome to the Chamber's Candidate Interview Series. I'm Christy Moore, and I serve as the president of the Dawson County Chamber of Commerce. On June 9th, the primary election will be held in Georgia, and early voting begins May 18th. In Dawson County, there are many local elections on the ballot. You may always view your sample ballot and polling location by visiting mvp.sos.ga.gov. One of the main areas of focus of our Chamber's strategic plan is advocacy. While we would typically host a forum for all candidates, due to the current pandemic and out of an abundance of caution that prioritizes the health and safety of the candidates and our staff, we are hosting in-depth candidate interviews instead. All candidates who are running for an office for which more than one candidate is running were invited to be interviewed. As a nonpartisan organization, we take seriously our role to promote issues of benefit to our businesses and community, as well as support the promotion of information about upcoming elections. The Chamber does not endorse a particular party nor particular candidates. We work diligently to ensure that these candidate interviews are fair to the participants and informative to our members and audience. Candidates were not given the questions prior to being interviewed. Questions were submitted by Chamber members and were predetermined by the Chamber's Advocacy Committee. Similar to a forum, each candidate will be given 3 minutes to give an opening statement, and will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Today, I am joined by Clint Smith, who is running to be the next state representative for District 9. Clint, would you like to kick us off with your opening statement?
Yes, I would, Christy. Thanks for having us. And I've always appreciated the Dawson County Chamber of Commerce. In fact, I go back quite a few years with the Chamber of Commerce in the formative years when the Chamber was just getting started. I remember some of the early people that were leaders. Tracy Skates, the late Tracy Skates, was, I think, the first full-time employee of the Dawson County Chamber of Commerce. And early interesting discussions and developments. I remember a lot of talk about adopting the Scotty dog logo because of its semblance, its general profile resemblance of the shape of Dawson County geographically. So I've got a lot of history with the Dawson County Chamber, and I want to compliment you because you're doing a great job and you've got a great reputation. The story about you getting trapped down at the Capitol during that snowstorm in 2014 is almost taken on an urban legend status. I've heard it from several people, so I appreciate your hard work and what you do. But enough about that. Let's talk about this campaign. I'm Clint Smith. I'm running for State House District 9. I've lived in the district 36 years. I've got a pretty wide, diverse background in business. I actually used to work in the restaurant industry and was an assistant manager at a restaurant in Atlanta. Then I got into a company and was working for my brother. He owned a truck driver leasing company whereby he would lease out truck drivers to companies all over the Southeast. And then I decided I had a calling to serve in the military. So I joined the Georgia Air National Guard, and I'm proud of my service. I served 32 years in the Georgia Air National Guard and started out in radar operations. And then eventually I made myself quite apparently important enough to the senior leadership to be transferred to state headquarters at Dobbins Air Reserve Base and worked in strategic planning, which frankly at this point has come into play with the current situation we find ourselves in with the pandemic, because a lot of what I did would be to plan for emergencies, whether it be weather related or civil disobedience, health issues, that the Guard plays a role. And we're seeing that now with the National Guard playing a role in helping with this pandemic in Georgia, specifically these sanitation strike force teams that have gone to nursing homes and to help our elderly. So, and then many people know I did eventually serve in the Georgia House of Representatives for 8 years. Unfortunately, I was a victim of reapportionment, whereby maps were created that were gerrymandered in such a way that the U.S. Supreme Court eventually affirmed an earlier ruling that those maps were unconstitutional. So in the time after that, I've still tried to be very productive in the community and have tried to contribute quite a bit.
Absolutely. Well, we know you formerly served as a state representative, but what makes you want to be a state representative now?
Well, when this situation developed, I did what I always do, and that's to go to the Lord in prayer, number one, to feel that this was indeed the right step as a Christian and in a way that I could be a good witness and contribute to this community. So after I did that, I then looked at the other candidates that had announced, and I saw that the banking industry was represented, lawyers, and some other interests. But I started thinking about just the average person, the average small business owner, and other people like that that need a voice. And I do believe I've got a reputation from my previous service of representing the average person and looking out for their interests. And so, weighing that, my experience, the knowledge that we indeed were in uncharted territory here as far as the pandemic, although this actually somewhat developed afterward, which made me feel good that I made the right decision. The simple fact that we need somebody with experience, because when the session gets started, hopefully in January of 2021, there's not going to be a lot of time for somebody to learn the ropes. We're going to be dealing with serious issues about belt tightening of the state budget and other things, whereby somebody with experience can jump right in there, knows the players from Governor Kemp to Speaker Ralston to Lieutenant Governor Duncan, and can actually make an immediate impact. So I thought it was a good idea that I should try to seek this seat once again.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a little bit about this, but share with us your public or your experience in public service, particularly building consensus, that qualifies you to run for this position.
Well, I mean, other than the obvious that I have served before, which shows that I can win and get reelected. And I had some difficult opponents in the past in my reelection efforts, but was able to win the day, which I feel good about. But I am consensus builder. The entire time that I was in the House of Representatives, and you probably know this, being a historian of the legislative process, the Democrats were in control of the entire process, whether or the entire functioning legislative body in the governor's seat. But despite that, I was able to work across the aisle and did a lot for Dawson County. One of the efforts that I was instrumental in happening and implementing was the change from the sole person county commission system of government to the 5-person board of commissioners. I passed that bill after a lot of input, town hall meetings, and other opportunities to meet with citizens and local elected officials, and we decided indeed it was time, for a number of reasons, to have a 5-person board of commissioners. It was put on the ballot, it was passed, and then I passed the enabling legislation. I also worked with local elected officials and in such a way that we determined that no longer the probate judge should have the responsibility of conducting elections. So I was able to pass local legislation to create a board of elections, a full-time registrar, to take that away from the probate judge and to allow for a elections office to give us the confidence that indeed the voting process is fair and honest. And I think it's worked in a growing county like Dawson County. Indeed, I don't think there's much doubt about that. So I've worked in a number of ways for the good of Dawson County, and obviously through my military experience, you learn you must work with people of diverse backgrounds, different interests for a common mission, and I have done that.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a little bit about hosting town halls back when you were looking at going from 1 commissioner to 5. If elected, how will you maintain accessibility for your constituents?
Well, I'll always let people know my personal information, my cell phone number, 678-316-8863. In fact, I think I was probably one of the first people that started doing that type of thing in North Georgia in the General Assembly, just putting all my personal information out there. And I did indeed have a number of town hall meetings, whether it be on Saturday afternoons or on weeknights, and I'll do that again. I'll try to get a consensus of when I think the best time to do that would be, or we could simply be flexible and do it at times depending on the time of the year, whether school's in session and that type of thing.
Absolutely. Well, you know this, having lived here for so long, but our community is blessed with a strong local sales tax base. The Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, ESPLOST for short, has generated funds that have allowed our school system to build beautiful buildings like the College and Career Academy and put an iPad in the hands of every student, kindergarten through 12th grade. Currently, state law only allows ESPLOST to be spent on bricks and mortar projects, textbooks, school buses, and technology, but not salaries. Would you support giving ESPLOST flexibility so schools can hire additional staff and faculty?
Very good question. In fact, I know you didn't set this one up on the tee for me, but I was actually one of the original co-sponsors that passed that resolution to allow the citizens of Georgia to vote on it, to allow capital projects to be funded with ESPLOST. So I've already done that. And to answer the second part of the question, yes, indeed. I think that's a good concept, and it will do a lot for individual school systems to address their personal needs. And a lot of times it's simply offering better salaries to get more qualified personnel, adding positions in places that may need it, that were not provided for in the past. And I think it's a good idea, and I support it. And as a related matter, I do support Governor Kemp's salary increases for teachers. I know part of that was funded. I support funding the rest of it.
Thank you. Well, as our state continues to grow, particularly north of Atlanta, and particularly in this district, transportation infrastructure becomes increasingly important. If elected, how do you intend to advocate for increased funding from the Department of Transportation?
Well, I think that's obviously a very important question, and we need to bring the parties to the table to discuss what we think is most effective for North Georgia versus the city of Atlanta or Metro Atlanta or whatever. But I'm open to the possibility of looking at special local option sales taxes that based upon the collective agreement of the local governments, and we might do this in like a multi-county effort where we know ahead of time what the projects are going to go for, and allow the citizens to vote for that. But I think before we go further in that regard, there needs to be enough scrutiny by the citizens to make sure they have input on it and that it's not just being ramrodded through. As I've talked to voters, and especially now with this pandemic where so many people are working from home, there's a lot of more talk about telecommuting and how do we balance that versus roads which allow people to get to wherever their marketplace or workplace is. And there's going to be more discussion about that. We don't need to lose sight of the fact that people enjoy getting out, coming to North Georgia, tourism, and that kind of thing. So there's a lot in play here relative to transportation, but the bottom line is people need to feel like they have a means of having their expression, their feelings felt, and that nobody's left out. So I think I can do that, and I've shown in my leadership in the past that I can be a party to that.
Absolutely. Well, for 2020, the Tax Foundation ranked Georgia 32nd in their State Business Tax Climate Index. This index is designed to rank how well states structure their tax systems and reflects the following variables: corporate tax, individual income tax, sales tax, unemployment insurance tax, and property tax. Recognizing that there are many ranking systems that we could reference, are there specific areas within the state government that you feel could be reduced or modified in order to ease unnecessary regulations, restrictions, and financial burdens upon Georgia's businesses?
That's a very good question, and that's an issue I've been talking about, creating a climate where startup businesses can feel free to begin and flourish. So one of the things I'm emphasizing is ending some of the regulation and fees that are involved with companies that that are original startups. We need to do that. That's for sure. We also need to, in my opinion, at some point down the road, gradually eliminate the state income tax, which would get us on the same footing with Tennessee and Florida and other southeastern states. There's some efforts out there that are being discussed and been floated in the General Assembly along those lines. But of course, with this pandemic and all the extra spending that's been taking place, the timing on that I don't think is the best, but I think it can happen eventually. So that goes back to one of the points I made earlier about my experience. I know a lot of these state agencies. I know some of the leadership and some of the ways that we can work as soon as everything hopefully gets back to somewhat level of normalcy to cut some of the waste and some of the areas where we're going to have to work to tighten our belts based upon all the spending that's taken place and the reserves that have been dipped into. And I think I can play a role in that. You may or may not know, I was one of the original proponents of the zero-based budgeting approach to state government. And eventually there was a form of that was passed in 2010, and Governor Deal signed it. But basically, it takes a zero-based budgeting approach every 5 years with the state budget, where each agency on that 5-year anniversary must justify more of their state budget, as opposed to expecting continuation and 85% of it to be automatically passed. My opinion is we should do that annually, and that way we could free up a lot of funds in a way that eventually will help the taxpayer, including businesses.
Absolutely. Well, as we've experienced in the last few months, and we're doing this by Zoom, access to broadband is vitally important. Telemedicine, long distance learning, and economic development all require access to high-speed internet. If elected, what are your ideas for improving access to broadband in your district and throughout the state?
I'm glad you asked that, because this is one of the issues I've been talking about quite a bit. And it needs to be addressed. It's fundamentally important for Dawson, Lumpkin, Forsyth, and other counties in North Georgia. I know Senator Steve Gooch has been working quite extensively on this issue, and I think if we can get somewhat more on the same table on this, it'll work effectively. One of the things I think we need to do is to get the Public Service Commission more involved. There's some legislation out there being discussed whereby the telecommunications companies and the electric management cooperatives work together in a way that will set up an infrastructure that it will eventually allow for a much faster broadband service. But we've got issues like attachment fees that have come up that create a stumbling block, and other things like that that really get right down to the infrastructure of making this happen. And so that's where I think the Public Service Commission can basically serve as a referee to bring the parties together in a way that will indeed implement long-term solutions. And that goes back to what I was talking earlier about telecommuting and that type of thing, which I think some people might embrace it even more after the social distancing and people isolating, that it's a concept that's here to stay.
Absolutely, we think it is here to stay for a lot of people. As you know, Dawson County is home to the longest operating corn maze in the state, Uncle Shucks, one of the top fall agritourism destinations, Bird's Pumpkin Farm, the tallest cascading waterfall east of the Mississippi, Amicalola Falls, and of course, the North Georgia Premium Outlets. Georgia's 9th House District is home to many other tourism destinations. How do you propose to promote and foster the sustainability and growth of tourism throughout the state of Georgia, given that it has such a great impact within Dawson, Lumpkin, and Forsyth counties?
A good question. And let's not forget our love for NASCAR and the Dawsonville Pool Room and the Racing Hall of Fame, which is very important to us as well. I think one of the reasons that I can contribute there is that I have a lot of contacts throughout the state from my activity as a former representative and just being a community activist for North Georgia. And we've got a lot to offer here, and so we need to do that through outlets such as the Chamber of Commerce, use video, use social media, and that type of thing in a way that I think can foster an even greater appreciation for North Georgia and Dawson County. So I think to answer your question specifically, my experience, my contacts, and my knowledge about how we can use technology and cooperative efforts like that are pretty much in my wheelhouse, and I can help there.
Absolutely. Well, if elected, what do you envision for your role in advocating for the businesses in your district? In particular, is there one business issue that you plan to champion?
Well, I touched on it a little bit previously, and that's just to basically allow businesses to flourish without too much government interference. There needs to be oversight in certain areas, but not in a way that strangles the ingenuity and the inventiveness of business. So I'm going to be a guardian for that constantly all the time. But I think workforce development issues are front and center for a lot of us, including myself. For example, we need to create a cooperative spirit with our universities like the University of North Georgia and other schools. And I think that school up there, the Mike Cottrell School of Business, has set a good example in different ways about how we can foster programs and incentives for young people to go into information technology, agribusiness, and other skill sets that would benefit North Georgia, as long as these young people stay here, settle down, build a family, and hopefully live here the rest of their lives. So a lot of this and this ties in together about fostering a strong climate for business and quality of life. And so I'd be working on workforce development issues and always remembering that having a strong public school system is also important, because businesses are looking at that. And families are looking at that when they relocate. Yeah, and I know you've probably are well aware that for 7 straight years, Georgia has been selected as the top state for business, and Site Selection Magazine makes that selection every year. You know that, but I'm just reminding people of that. And if you break it down, they have 10 separate categories that they look at in making that selection, and North Georgia plays a big part in all of those categories.
Absolutely, and we hope that we continue that great honor as a state in the coming years. I hope one day we'll get to celebrate 15 years of being
Right.
the top state in which to do business. But to follow up on that question, by the federal definition of small business, which is having 500 or fewer employees, all Dawson County businesses are small. I would venture to guess all businesses in this district are small. So please share with us why a small business owner should vote for you.
Well, number one, I'll give you a practical reason, and that's one of that's one of the positive things about having served before, as long as you've done a good job, that every year in my tenure, I received a 100% positive score from the National Federation of Independent Business. And they're an organization that looks out for moderate to small businesses. And so you can rest assured through that track record, you can have confidence in me, and I'm not going to change. Also, I've studied and worked with a number of business leaders in the community and understand, just from developing good personal relationships, what it takes to represent these interests. And that's Forsyth, Dawson, and Lumpkin as well. And I know from talking to them that they get frustrated at times, and that I want to be there for them to make sure they've always got my ear. Back to what I was talking about earlier about doing everything we can to make sure these small business owners can enjoy their quality of life. That goes to other issues such as public safety and having a strong school system, like I talked about before. Because when you own a business, there's a lot of pressure there every day to keep the doors open, to keep things flowing smoothly. if you don't have to worry about other parts of your life, then I think you can focus on your job as a professional. And I've shown through my leadership in any number of ways that quality of life in Dawson County is important to me.
Absolutely. Well, as we come to a close, please share with us anything maybe that you're passionate about that we didn't cover as you share with us your closing statement.
Well, I want everybody to know that I am running for the right reasons. My track record is strong. The National Rifle Association has given me an A rating, and that's not based on filling out a questionnaire. That's based upon my track record of 8 years in the General Assembly. The Georgia Life Alliance has certified me as a pro-life advocate and strong leader, which I think is very important. And I will always stand up for life, not just pre-birth, but all the way through to seniors. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention here at the end. Looking out for our seniors, showing respect for them. They've meant so much to all of us, have been guiding lights in our community. And so I'm emphasizing the fact that I think the state needs to take a greater role in oversight of nursing homes and assisted living homes and other places where our seniors live, in a way that will make sure that they're safe, make sure that there's professional staff caring for them, and make sure these companies that own these homes are solvent and that they will be there to provide for the care of our loved ones. I've been emphasizing that along the way. And again, I think the small business owners can appreciate my track record and what I'm going to do for them in the future. It's Clint Smith. My website is www.clintsmith.org. And I did want to throw in one final topic that is important, I think, to a lot of people, including business owners, and that's the issue of daylight savings time. A lot of people have different opinions about what we should do about that in Georgia, whether we should keep it the same, change it, or get Congress involved. So I did put that question on my website to get some feedback from the citizens at www.clintsmith.org, and I would appreciate everybody's support and vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Clint, for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully we'll get to see all the candidates in person sometime soon.
That would be great. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you.